Okay. Yeah. So like, it's got like lights, a thing I put up in the back and stuff.
A drop screen like school pictures.
Yeah, kind of. Except it's my army blanket from when we were deployed.
Oh, you're a whoopee.
So yeah, I still have one. I had two. The other one I think got shredded in the wash or something. Um,
Yeah.
so just make sure this camera's out. Anyway, but yeah, I have a second camera up over here that I'm going to do my stitch in my recordings from
Okay.
overlay, so it's a little bit better quality and stuff. So maybe hopefully one day if we do this again, if I can get you in the same room, we can use my fancy pants cameras and stuff that record a little bit. This one sucks, but hopefully I'll get a new one soon.
Okay.
But yeah, so I just kind of set it up in my living room and make it happen, man.
All
Um,
right.
but yeah, now I kind of wish I was recorded with you. Who did you call me again?
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed
Hey, Muhammad. Yeah, like, I don't remember that
with
Al Qaeda guy calling me Al Qaeda and stuff with
a
my
beard
beard.
like that. You see a man pajamas to walk around in.
Man, I get made fun of by my friends all the time. They call me like Jebediah and stuff because they say it's the Amish looking thing. But I had a big old. It was all like down to here, but it was like my hair is not super thick, so it didn't look good and it was real scruffy. And so I was like, I have to try to do something with this. So I just kind of trimmed it up. And then my wife and daughter were complaining about my mustache and how it itches them and stuff. So I was like, well, I'll just shave the mustache off and see how it looks. Maybe I'll look kind of like Wolverine, He doesn't have a mustache.
You
And
look like a Florida man.
yeah, not so
That's
much
a stereotype.
Wolverine, but I mean, I don't know. People can make fun of me, but I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, it just kind of fits my round head. So
Yeah,
whatever.
it is true.
I go with
I've
it.
been told, I feel your pain. I've been told I can't buzz my hair because I
I
have an oddly shaped head.
I was hoping you were gonna come on with like a big old cop stash and just be like, because I remember so much you, if I remember correctly, you talking about how like you can't grow a beard and stuff, and we all tried to grow mustaches at one time, and
No, yeah, my mustache comes in like a bad kung fu movie. I can just get the catfish in the corners,
yeah, you can do
and it's
like the Fu
really
Manchu or something.
it's just the corners. I have the Hitler delete already installed in, so I can't grow any hair in the middle.
That would have been fantastic. You're like, yeah, I've been doing that hymn stuff for a long time, but I use it on my mustache, and look how, big and glorious it is. Hawaii
Luxurious.
5-0 and stuff. Or not Hawaii 5-0. I'm sorry. What? Oh, man,
Yeah, that was Hawaii Five
Tom
O was a
Selleck kind
Tom
of
Selleck.
stash.
Yeah, Hawaii Five O. No, and in the Blue Bloods, Tom Selleck with the mustache.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, I don't really have an intro or anything like that. It's more of just kind of starting off, tell us who you are, where you come from, whatever you want to go.
All right. Well, my name's Lawrence Gurdo. I'm from the town of Poland, New York, which is upstate New York, which is closer to Canada than it is New York City. The town I grew up in doesn't even have a stoplight or a Walmart. It's about a 20-minute drive to the closest Walmart. Uh, I was the middle child of three children and ended up going to Niagara University on an ROTC scholarship. Niagara Falls, New York is where the school was at, and I just happened to luck into the scholarship. It's a friend of mine had been trying out for it, but he was actually too old. He had been in OIF one, and I think he was 30 or 29 years old when the scholarship was made available, but he had aged out. And I got a phone call from a buddy of mine that said, "Hey, come on out. There's a scholarship just sitting here." And I fell into it and showed up, did the standard Army PT test, which is push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2 mile run. And I passed everything. They're like, "All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks when school starts." And then, yeah,
Like,
it
not
was one of
bad.
those
I did a
things.
little jog here, and you guys are going to pay for my school. Like, that's
Yeah,
cool.
it was a good gig. I mean, this was during the surge, so the government just had tons of money to throw around it, anything military related. So it was showed up, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? And they gave me Army PT gear, so it was like boot camp light, but the Michelob ultra light version of it. So it was one of those that I show up and they're like, okay, here's this winter PTs and summer PTs, and just show up dressed like this with socks and your PT belt. I'm like, okay, cool, this is fun. And then the first run of the year, they put old flak jackets from Vietnam on us, and we ran the Niagara Falls Gorge. So it ends up being a 1 mile run through campus. Then it's 3 miles along the Niagara River in Niagara Falls, and then 3 miles back up. It was a smoker. It was miserable.
Wow, a 6 mile, and so did you have any aspirations to join the military at all at the time, or have you thought about it,
Yeah.
or?
Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to join the army. Uh, just grew up watching old army movies from like World War II or Korea or whatever it was, and thought that was a blast. And then just kept up at it. And I had applied to West Point and Annapolis, and I ended up actually getting accepted to the Merchant Marine Academy, which is in Kingsport, New York. So in order to go through that, you have to get a congressional nomination.
Wow.
And I had gone to Academy Day and met with our member of Congress for this area in New York. And it's through federal, it's not state. So this guy actually has an office in the Capitol building, or he had one.
Yeah.
And I applied and ended up going seeing Merchant Marine Academy, and it looked like it'd be fun. It has all the kit the regular, uh, more commonly known academies have, with like plebes and not being able to go home and getting yelled at all the time. And long story short, I did not want to take calculus, and I did not end up taking that nomination. They're accepting it and going to the school. So I went to local community college for a year, did criminal justice, which is commonly, or is commonly known as retail sales. So it's not as good as a barista, but you can sell shoes at Kohl's or Walmart. And from there, I ended up getting a phone call to go out to Niagara. And I had no idea there were more branches in the military, or the army, I should say,
Hmm.
until I got there. And I learned that there was chemical, there was admin, there was armor, there was cav, there was, well, not cav's not a branch, but infantry, aviation, ordnance, transportation, quartermaster, MP, all the different branches. I had no idea they existed. I just thought it was you go in your infantry, and then from there you get kind of specialized. But
Yeah.
no, I learned out what they all were, and I kind of, I was like, I want to be a tanker. I want to drive a tank or drive a striker or something cool. And one of our instructors had told us about ordnance. So I remember we got a flat tire, and I was the only one out of the truckload of future officers, not to fear the military, but that knew how to change a tire. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what you got to do. And he's like, wow, you should go ordnance. I'm like, what's that? And he's like, oh, you're auto mechanics. That's pretty cool. Auto mechanics. I had a welding, my certifications in welding.
Ordnance and auto mechanic, like nowhere even close to the same thing.
It's not. So that's what I learned later on, was that ordnance, obviously it's ordnance, meaning explosives, and a little escutcheon that you wear in your collar is a primitive looking bomb. But it basically boils down to, I don't know the exact number, but it's like 85% is like vehicle maintenance, and
Okay.
like 10% is like actual munitions, like setting up ASPs and knowing how to transport ammo and what kind of vehicles, what distance, and AB, all the long list. And there's charts and graphs and diagrams of how it's supposed to be done. And then there's a little tiny segment on top, which is EOD. So I remember going like, yeah, I'll go for ordnance. I'll try that out. And then comes up to do your couple years of ROTC training, which is just they learn how to drill. They teach you like actions on an objective, like assaulting a bunker, setting up an ambush, everything you'd learn, and just get a glancing overview of how military operations are run. And then they will send you out to LDAC, which was at Fort Lewis at the time, or Lewis McChord out in Washington State. And you're out there for a month, and you spend the first like 10 days in garrison. So sleeping in World War II barracks and just doing confidence courses and combat water survival and range day. And then they send you out to the field for 10 days, which is where you do your patrolling and set up ambushes and just go to objectives using a map and compass and protractor. Then as that progresses on and you pass through all that school, they send you back for your senior year. And senior year is where they make sure your academics are good. And if you want to become an aviator, you got to take the aviation test, make sure you pass that. And then that's when all the pressure gets on for making sure you get the branch you want. And it's, you put a wish list down unless you go National Guard or Reserve. And your wish list for males at the time, it was one of your top three had to be combat arms.
Hmm.
And then from there, you can just list what you wanted to do. So if you wanted to do uh, infantry, and then you wanted to be quartermaster, and then you wanted to be signal, you could have put those in that order. And then depending upon the needs of the army, they'd be like, all right, well, we're not going to put you infantry because all the alpha males are going for that. But we do need good guys in signal. So they would send you off to signal school. And that's the wish list you create. And then you have branching night, which is, it's kind of like a celebration day. All the senior instructors and the cadre for your schoolhouse know what you're going to branch. And you would all go out to some fancy restaurant and you'd sit down, and at the end of the meal, like, all right, so and so, you're branched infantry, you're going this, and everyone would be all happy. And then occasionally you get people that were branch detail to chemical corps. Like I remember all the females in our grade year, they wanted to go signal, but they ended up being branch detail chemical corps.
Mhm.
So that meant the first 4 years of your contract, you were a chemo. So in other words, you're an admin officer. And then once you end up going to the rank of captain and higher, that's when you would end up going to your actual school that you wanted to go to. And that was branching day. And from branching day, you ended up getting your dates when actual Army orders saying, Lieutenant Gurdo, your social security number, you're set to go to Fort Benning, Georgia for 6 weeks of training starting this date. And that's where I ended up going to, is Fort Benning, and seeing a real Army base, seeing how a real Army base works, and people saluting you, and you're just a fresh butter bar. You're like, oh yeah, got it, Roger that,
Yeah.
specialist.
No more Army light stuff. It's now
No,
you're
no
in
more Army
real
life. It's
deal.
legit stuff. It's you walk on the grass and Sergeant Major comes out, starts chewing on you, and you're like, hey, Sergeant Major, you call me sir, and then a colonel comes screaming out of the building and tears you apart. So it's one of those things, and it was amazing to be there to see like guys training for Ranger School, guys in the Ranger bats. You see the jump towers from Band of Brothers right there at Fort Benning. It was an awesome experience, and you get to meet all the different people. You get to see West Pointers, you get to see ROTC cadets, you get to see people that had just finished OCS, which was the buildings right behind the barracks I stayed at. So 1 week they're wearing the chrome dome helmets with the ascots, trimming grass with a pair of scissors, and the next day they're running over there with you, and they're the dudes that are most high speed. They're still in that mindset of just following orders, just doing what they got to do. But more surprising, a lot of the West Point kids were really cool too. There was always that the tension between West Pointers and regular ROTC guys, that their date of rank was a day before yours, so they always had that step up. But all of them are really, I never ran into any bad guys. They were all genuinely nice people. Like I can't think of a single person that was a bad guy when I was there or didn't know what was going on. And you do your 6 weeks of training there, and from there you see, okay, well, here's the reserve people, here's the National Guard people, here's the active duty people, and people scrambling to find not a hotel, an apartment, or buy a house around Columbus, Georgia, or try and find some on-post housing. And 5 guys living in one house because they're all infantry, and they just all kind of hang out together.
Yeah.
And then from your initial school is when you go to your phase 3, which is your specialization. So I specialized in ordnance. I ended up branching reserves, and in my reserve contract, I'm going ordnance to this particular unit out of Syracuse, New York. And I went up to Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland before that shut down. And that's where you went from getting run like horses every day at Fort Benning to getting into the real officer school. They're like, hey, you're an officer now. We're not going to handhold you for PT. You're going to have to do this on your own. And that's where you go from doing the physical aspect of the job to doing the mental aspect of the job, where the stress is different. It's not stressful in the sense of you're getting your head kicked in. It's stressful in the sense of, okay, I have X number of soldiers. They have these specialties. We have these trucks. We have to move this equipment. We have to set up this. And it's a lot of actual study time. And that's when you get the full aspect of the job.
Yeah. So and then that's one of the things that I really just made me think of doing this and really wanted to bring up is those other sides of things, because I just like to touch on a couple of things. When you look at you as an officer, when you get lieutenant, you're basically a private in the officer world. Your life is obviously different, but there's a lot of similarities there that I think people don't realize. because of that separation of rank and authority and such. And a lot of the general public, I'm sure, don't, realize like, oh, that dude's an officer in the army. Like that's a big deal. Not that it's not a big deal, but inside the army, it's totally different. Like you're still getting dumped on like everybody else by by your higher ups and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. When you can become a lieutenant, you get the lieutenant pay, you get to lieutenant rank, but also you learn how to empty out garbage cans and make
Yeah.
photocopies and set up PowerPoints. Because if you weren't good at PowerPoint and you didn't understand Excel, you were you were drowning. And it would be something that, hey, set up a PowerPoint slide, you spend all night doing it. And then you're sitting in the briefing and the colonel's sitting there at the end of the table going through the briefing and he looks at the slide, goes, okay, click two back. All right, now go forward to where it is. You see your line, it adjusted down a little bit. Fix that next time. It's nothing about the content. It was all about the little details.
You use the wrong font.
The wrong font, yeah, between Times New Roman and Courier New and Arial, all the different fonts. And it's just one man's opinion. As long as the content is there and it's correct, the little details on whether the line is down or up, that shows that you're out of touch. But
Yeah.
it's one man's opinion. They may have people out there that are going to say, "Well, no, it's about the detail. The detail is most important because if you screw up detail on a PowerPoint slide, you're going to screw up in the field." Anyone that's been everywhere knows you have guys that are amazing in garrison. Their uniforms are pressed perfectly. Their boots are just amazing. They just look great. They're squared away. And you put them anywhere that's muddy or nasty or things aren't nice, and they are lost. They
Yeah.
are swimming in circles and they have no clue what's going on. And you take that private or you take that lieutenant or you take that master sergeant, someone that is just a mess in garrison. They show up late. They smell like booze. They got three divorces. They're always getting in fights. And you put them anywhere that requires any sort of thinking outside of the box or any real practical knowledge. And they're like, yeah, what the fuck are you doing that for, sir? You do it this way. And that's the way it's done. And you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, man. Here we go. Whatever happens, happens.
Well, see, and I think that's where about finding that balance, and that I think a lot of leadership gets lost in is in they try to focus on because you have guys who are either one way or the other, and some people that's just playing to their strengths. Like me, I have a more analytical mind, so I tend to break things down more than what's necessary a lot of the times. But I think I'm pretty good at being able to act when I need to. But then there's other people that just like they're just really good at acting in the moment. Like no plans, no nothing. They haven't thought anything through, but they execute and they execute phenomenally. Well, there's that finding that balance in leadership of how to utilize your people best, merge those two, realizing that the font or the space in your PowerPoints is maybe too small of a detail, but we also don't need to forget the important small details in times and placements and enemies behaviors and
Absolutely.
stuff like that.
That's absolutely true. Because it's just finding that blend is just knowing, and that's where it comes to the higher leadership to recognize the guys that are totally disconnected, getting covered in dirt every day, the guys in our counting truck numbers, the guys that are back in the rear that are sitting there having to answer to the stars or full birds. And when it comes to a light colonel or full bird colonel, it's able to say, hey, that LT, he might not be able to spell or write correctly, but he knows what's going on. He knows his guys. He knows the equipment inside out. He can tell you exactly what's going on. Or we have this, let's say, major over here that, he's a major. He's done his time. He knows his stuff, but I can't trust him with a potato gun. I don't want him to be in the rugs. I don't want him to be doing anything of that sort. So I'm going to take the responsibility and kind of shift it around to just make the major feel good, but then like put the heavy lifting on the LT because he excels at that. He or she might be terrible in garrison, have a messed up looking hat, but he knows or she knows, okay, this is what's going on. This is how to get it done. You know how to use your guys and you work with your guys good enough that they can just be set. Hey, move A to B. I don't care how you do it. Roger that, sir. I'm on it, and just go when they do it, act out. And
Yeah.
that's key.
Ideally, you have that major who's good at the paperwork, and then the lieutenant who's good at execution. You put them together, and then you have them work their lanes, but then hopefully rub off on each other a little bit,
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah, for
yeah. And
sure.
That's the perfect blend. That's like finding, this is my peanut butter and this is my chocolate. Let's blend them together to make a Reese's peanut butter cup type of deal.
So, earlier you brought up the stresses of the office work and such, and that's another big point too that I don't think a lot of people realize is like obviously I wouldn't compare our experience to infantrymen or
No.
rangers, especially special forces, anything kind of like that. But there are still plenty of they like we still and you work plenty of 24-hour plus shifts
Yeah.
worked several days in a row, still out in the desert getting bombs thrown at you and things like that.
Yeah.
So if you can you speak on that experience a little bit from the other side?
So it's kind of a weird blend of you're there, you're overseas, and you're like, okay, well, when do we start working tomorrow? You never fall in and just like I didn't have the, the handoff for my counterpart when I landed in country. I landed in a plane to Kuwait. Next day, met up because your head is spinning because you fly back into time and you land. I met one of my E6s the next day, so I'm still confused. I'm still on New York time, but I'm in Kuwait and it's the desert. It's 110 degrees at 9 o'clock in the morning. There's a sandstorm blowing. You've just been separated from all the guys you've trained up with for the past 4 months. You meet this E6 from South Georgia, North Florida, and he's like, "Hey, so you come with me, right?" Yeah, I guess so. All right, grab your gear, let's go. You go on the C-130 and you fly into country, and standard procedures. You get an airplane, you make sure there's no your magazine's not in the weapon, everything's all good. He's like, "Hey, sir, just leave that in there."
Yeah.
Like, oh, I guess this is real. And then you land in the plane and you climb off and you're walking around, you're looking around, what the fuck is that over there? It's a C Ram sitting on top of a building. You're like, this is this is real life. They're like, yeah, it's real life. And it's just you don't realize that, and it's hard to describe it until you've been there. When you land, you get off the AC plane, the civilian one, and then you get in a military plane and you're just sitting there sweating all day. You drink water all day and you never have to urinate. You just sweat all day. Your clothes end up being crusty, and it's like, well, I didn't sweat through it. Why does it look this way? And it's you never get prepared for actually getting there, getting in country, and just this is how we roll. But I was lucky enough to have a great team of guys and be like, okay, what time do we get here? Oh, sir, we get here at this time. This is what we got to do. And okay, for me, my particular experience is I'm an ordnance officer. I was trained to be an ordnance officer, and the experience I had with transportation was I was in a transportation unit. That was it. And one of the moments that I will never forget is sitting down and meeting with all my troops, and oh, I'm Sergeant so and so. I'm Sergeant so and so. He's my specialist. Oh, okay. Hey, what's going on? I'm like, what do we do? Well, sir, we coordinate the trucks to come up from the port, and we load a piece of equipment on top of it. And my guys here, they're the ones that input the information at PC AIMS, which is the Army tracking system for equipment, and making sure it gets on and offloaded. And then they get back on the trucks, get on the boat, and then ship to Bahrain, then from Bahrain to one of the ports in the States. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, guys, let's gather in. So I was trained as an ordnance officer. And the advanced training I have for transportation was one PowerPoint slide in ordnance school 3 years ago. And they said, hey, there's a picture of a boat, a truck, and a plane. And it says transportation. You'll never need to worry about it. And that's what we're doing now. So you guys do what you got to do. And if anyone yells at you that's an officer, direct them to me and I'll get yelled at, and just ignore them. And then you guys continue to do what you have to do. And I was blessed by God to have an amazing team of guys that actually knew what they were doing. And if anything came up, yeah, I'd go in the meeting, get yelled at by a major, and then call up my major, be like, yo, sir, this guy's doing this, then the other thing, and just ignore him and continue to do our job. And that's what we did. And it was absolutely amazing. But as an officer, you're kind of flexible in that sense. Is in the military, they're good at training people to do one specific job, then putting them into a unit and having them do the job they never trained to do. You'll have forklift operators using a TCM's box, and then you'll have truck drivers driving a forklift. And it's not like they can just switch jobs because someone in the higher up said, well, we need sergeants, we need Private Smith or Specialist Smith in this position. Well, sir, he's not qualified in that position. But he'll figure it out. Do some cross training. It's good for him,
Take them
which
for
is
3 days, get them a laminated paper license real quick. We'll make it happen.
we'll make it happen, sir. And that was one of the things I took away from officer school is okay, you have guys that very, 63 whiskey, 68 Delta, whatever their specific MOS was. That was the job they were supposed to have in officer school. And that's the job they're supposed to have in the military. But when you get in the military, like, hey, that guy's job is not doing that. It's that. Let's just switch him. No, sir, we can't do it. We're gonna have to do the rating chain over again. He lives here with it. It's it's great on paper, but sometimes in real life it doesn't really work that well.
Yeah. So if I could back up just a little bit,
Yeah, absolutely.
you went through college, you did your
Yep.
ROTC, and you went to you got selected for ordnance, and
Yep.
you
I
w
did a reserve contract, so
so
I
so you got to pick at that point, like if you were going active duty, reserve. Am I understanding that when you say that, or
so you during your senior year, everyone hopes to go active duty, or you have a few guys like myself that wanted to go reserves or National Guard. We had three or four of us out of my class that wanted to do National Guard or reserves. And at that point, you're able to say, okay, sir, you meet with your battalion commander before branching day. And you say, hey, sir, I've found this unit at whatever my hometown is. They have a slot specific for me. That's what I want to do. And then from there is when you go about and you fill out a contract saying, I'm assigned to this unit. You meet with that unit, you email that unit administrator and they accept you into their books. And you're like, okay, when you graduate and you get your branch, you're guaranteed to get this specific branch and to go to this unit. And during the time that I was actually, my year group commission in 2008 was a time when the National Guard and reserves were really hurting for troops because a lot of people have been like, hey, I signed up for the National Guard. I want to help build flood levees in Arkansas. I don't want to go over and drive trucks in, Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever we were. So a lot of guys are like, I'm not going National Guard. I'm not signing up for it. I'm just going to go active duty. So the National Guard and reserves were actually pulling guys from the active duty pool, and it was interesting because some people didn't want to go National Guard. They ended up getting pulled to it. Then when you got to one of the schoolhouses, they're like, hey, we know you didn't want to be here, so we're going to give you the option. You can go back to active duty.
okay? So then you went to your ordnance. Then you started, actually um, like drilling in an ordnance unit and really learning how
Yeah.
to do that part. Okay. And I just realized the time, so I don't mean to accelerate a little bit there,
No,
but
no.
I know you'll have a limited amount of time. So I was wondering maybe from there, if we skip ahead a little bit, we get back up to going to Iraq. So you're
Yes.
an ordnance guy, and
I'm an
then
ordnance guy. So my unit I was assigned to originally in my Syracuse Reserve unit was a troll unit. So they went out and they not troll like as in the critter or like an internet troll, but their mission was to go inspect the books of other units, so reserve or National Guard or other reserve units that were engineers or ordnance or MPs to make sure they were all up to snuff. But when Iraq happened and Afghanistan happened, they went from being just inspecting the books to actually doing OCT missions. And the OCT mission was the observer controller trainer. So they trained up the guys to go to Afghanistan or Iraq or Bahrain or wherever they were going at that particular time. So it was as a lieutenant, that was my first experience with like fobs and fob operations and how to make sure a unit to see how it worked, to see the dynamics. I remember training up individuals, a Coast Guardsman actually, and seeing him in Fort Dix, New Jersey, doing the mission for my reserve unit, my first unit, meeting him there, and then going overseas and being like, "Hey, I saw you. What's up, sir?"